Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365, and we're lucky enough to get one of our favorite national guys on 2 weeks to the day before the draft to talk NFL draft with us. He does so for the NFL.com. Eric Edholm, good enough to jump into us. How you been, Double E?
John and Jody, what's happening? I'm doing well. Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
We appreciate your jumping in for us. We want you to pick up right where John and I left off because we value your opinion. Defensive end or edge is a spot that we think the Eagles will be looking at heavily at number 10, either trading up or trading back, but somewhere very much in that neighborhood. The 5 guys I threw out were Will Anderson, you'd have to move up. Tyree Wilson, probably have to move up. And then the 3 guys who may well be there when they pick, Smith and Van Ness and Murphy. How do you rank those 5? Put those 5 in order. If you want to say there's a bigger drop-off between 1 and 2 or 2 and 3 or 3 and 4, those 5 edge guys are distinct possibility Eagles could end up with one of them. How would you rank them?
They could. Yeah, I have Will Anderson and Tyree Wilson, no shock, as my top 2. And they're different guys, right? I mean, they're I would say Will Anderson's more of the Khalil Mack mold, in terms of that style of rusher, a little bit shorter, but has enough length, has plenty of length with the arms, and uses that long arm move quite a bit. Tyree Wilson has even more and is a more gifted athlete. We just haven't seen as much of him, as much production, but the upside is tremendous. I mean, I think if he finished the year healthy and tested, I think we would be talking about him in a little bit different light, even if he is going to go very high regardless. I think the buzz surrounding him would have been bigger. Nolan Smith's a tricky one for me, though. And I, on the surface, completely understand why he's being considered in this range. He could have come out a year ago, was very highly regarded. I thought played better when he was on the field than he had that pec injury, but I thought he was better in 2021 based on the games that I watched. I didn't get to see every single snap he took, but the testing has clearly pushed him up there. In the Hassan Reddick role, it makes a lot of sense, but boy, I don't know. For not every team, I would put him quite that high. For the Eagles, I might, right? They know how to use him. They've found success in that role. And then the other guy's just a little bit lower. I don't know that Miles Murphy's ever going to be a superstar, but I think he can be a very good player who thrives with his athleticism. So, it's just a little bit hard. It's a deep class too. I mean, and you could consider Tyler Van Ness to be in that group as well. So, it's going to be interesting to see how teams kind of separate these guys at this position.
I've been asking all the draft guys we have on, and I want to get your thoughts, Eric, at the top, because we're talking about the Eagles at 10 mainly. But
right.
So, how many true top tier, whether you want to call it blue chip, tier 1 players do you have in this draft, and how many in that group are in the quarterbacks? Because there might be 4 quarterbacks, and if there's 4 quarterbacks going in the top 9, that's going to be good for Philadelphia when you're talking about potentially getting a real top tier player at number 10.
Yeah, I mean, it's close on the quarterbacks. Obviously, your grades versus, like, I don't know that I consider. I mean, I think Young and Stroud both have very high floors. Young, it's the health durability question, I think, more than anything. Stroud, it's what is his superpower? Is he ever going to be more than a merely solid or very good quarterback? But I think I would safely kind of put them in that upper tier, and considering where they're likely to be drafted, I think it's smart to do so, only because, I don't think the Eagles are looking over their tally sheet saying, well, we're not sure if those 2 guys are going to go. And there's a really good chance Richardson goes, and a respectable chance that Levis is included in those top 9 selections prior to the Eagles pick. So, for accounting purposes, those guys absolutely count. The ones that are tricky, Bijan Robinson for me is a blue chip prospect. Is he guaranteed to go in the first 9 picks? I don't think so. I don't know that that's a lock by any means. We mentioned Lucas Van Ness earlier. People are a little bit mixed on him. I mean, the upside is exciting, alluring, enticing, but the production hasn't been there. He hasn't technically started, although he did lead the Hawkeyes in snaps up front. But, I saw more of a player who was effective inside against slower guards than outside against quicker tackles. So, you got to know what you're drafting there. And then offensive line would be another position. It's like, I don't really know for sure that one of them, or more than one anyway, is going to be drafted in the first 9. So, I realize I'm kind of, two-siding your question here, but I would say there's somewhere between 6 and 7 truly blue chip prospects in this class. Jalen Carter being a mystery man of sorts.
Yeah.
And
what are you hearing? Sorry to interrupt, Eric.
Yeah.
What are you hearing on Jalen Carter?
I think the Eagles are a team
all the time, and everyone's doing their investigating.
Yeah.
And the investigating is going to determine where he's going to get selected. Because just purely on talent, we all know he's a top 5 talent.
Right.
But what are people finding out? Are you hearing anything that you did not know that you say, all right, that'll either keep him entrenched in where he is, top 5 talent, or, oh, shoot, this guy could really slide come draft night?
Yeah, I've heard a few things that I haven't necessarily been able to 100% corroborate, so it doesn't do me a lot of good to just, well, here's all the dirt I dug up on Jalen Carter. I just dump it out here for you guys, but gotta be careful, right? You gotta make sure.
Well, thank you for doing
what
that.
you're saying, but if all of the things that I heard were true, then you have a complicated evaluation. Not somebody who, as far as I can tell, is cutting the heads off goats, but somebody public squares, right? But
sometimes you need that guy.
Every locker room can use a goat severer, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Maybe that
goat
goat severer.
But I would say that it's almost to the level, depending on the team, where it's going to require ownership sign off, where it's going to require that kind of approval, where the GM, the week of the draft goes to the owner and presents their draft plan and says, here's what we're thinking. If Jalen Carter is there at pick number X, we think we'll take him. Thoughts, and then the owner says, well, I'm not comfortable with that, or what do we know? And, a lot of teams I think are going to play cautious. I mean, Howie Roseman has as much job security as anybody in the NFL. Mm-hmm. They're coming off the Super Bowl appearance. Fletcher Cox, a free agent, on and on and on. It does add up. I mean, I'm just saying, I don't know that he'll be there at 10, and I don't know that they'd take him at 10. But if you're looking for a lot of boxes to check off, Philly's got a bunch of them.
Yeah. Goats aside, and we know the legal problems, but how much of a big deal in the NFL with personnel people was the pro day, showing up out of shape, not being able to finish certain drills? Maybe it's the stress of what he went through. It could be as simple as that. But how did people around the league kind of view that?
Well, that's why he had a lot of visits after that, right? And I believe he kind of settled with the DA the next day, very closely after that. So that had to be a relief for him, obviously. And I'm sure they were very anxious to do so. Right. Did the stress contribute to his conditioning? Perhaps, but gaining 13 pounds or 9 pounds or whatever it was over the course of 2 weeks is a little bit concerning, right? I mean, I know we all have our ice cream binges and whatnot, but let's
me too many. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Right. Exactly. So I just wonder, whether teams got enough answers and felt comfortable enough with what they heard from Carter, what his excuses were, what his reasons for being out of shape were, what his reasons for, possibly misleading the police at first. So there's a lot to unpack there.
All right. I want to jump into the running back market with you. First, 2-part question. The first is going to be Bijan related, because it seems like that's all we talk about here in Philadelphia is Bijan. But once we get past Bijan, I want to ask about everybody else. Bijan Robinson is the best running back to come out in the draft since who?
Yeah, Saquon is the name you hear the most. That's the guy who he sort of gets compared to the most, even though I think they're different runners. Saquon might be a little bit more physically blessed. He's got mass that Bijan doesn't possess. But yeah, it's kind of I think in some ways he's a little bit more creative a runner, whereas Barkley is maybe a little bit more explosive and powerful. Maybe he's got those pistons for legs, and I like the thickness and the lower body build of Bijan Robinson. So he's built to last. I'm not worried about, him being, oh boy, we gave him 18 carries last week. I don't know what's going to happen. Of course he's fine, right? This is Jahmyr Gibbs, different conversation, but Yeah, I would say that's the name that you probably hear the most in the scouting circles. And obviously, not every team would have taken him number 2 overall, but there were some who would have taken him in the top 10. So, kind of interesting to keep that in perspective as we look at where he might go.
All right. And you mentioned Gibbs. Is he the unquestioned number 2? If so, who's number 3? I think the Eagles will certainly be thinking about taking it back. I think if they trade backwards and Bijan is there later in the first round, he's in their mix. But how do you rank this year's running back class after Robinson?
Yeah, and the Eagles were so good at obviously we saw Kenneth Gainwell have late season success, and we've seen Miles Sanders. I'm not saying these guys aren't good players, of course they are, but the question becomes, do you need to take that player, right? Is it too much of a luxury? At a certain point, I think it's perfectly fine. I've got Gibbs. I think Zach Charbonnet is going to be a little bit underrated in some regards, just in terms of his ability to kind of handle a decent workload, be effective on third downs, kind of a nice all around back in some ways. So, he's definitely somebody who I think is really appealing in a lot of ways. And, I would say after that, it gets a little bit, they all kind of get lumped together a little bit. I'm not as big a fan of Tank Bigsby as some people are. Injuries, fumbles. Tajay Spears might only be a third down guy. Devin A. Chain, specialist, so there's, kind of beauty in the eye of the beholder for a lot of these guys. But Roschon Johnson, same thing. I would say he's a great complimentary back. I'm sure he'd be somebody that the Eagles would consider if they want a little bit of a bigger option, somebody who's a little bit more of a straight ahead power guy to complement, some of the other pieces. So there's, Kendry Miller, we didn't see him in the title game. That was a disappointment, but he attracted a lot of attention at his pro day as well.
Yeah, that'll excite Eagles fans when they get a Texas running back, but it ends up being Roschon Johnson.
Hey, if you can't get that,
he will be a very good player, by the way.
He could. I think he will. Yeah, I think so.
With a +1 at quarterback and Jalen Hurts. I was talking to an Eagles scout yesterday, Eric, and he mentioned the running game and Jalen Hurts. If you really want to improve the running game with the Eagles, they spread people out. They like to run the football against light boxes, so they often run when they have empty sets. They'll bring a back in and sort of run there to try to get that light look, and then Jalen Hurts threatens the backside, and all of a sudden you have all these problems for the defense. And he said it's kind of counterintuitive, but go get another receiver or go get another threatening tight end, and that'll make the running game even better. No matter who the running, might be Rashad Penny, might be Trey Sermon. Insert name. With Jalen Hurts, he creates those kind of issues. But I want to bring you to the receivers as a whole, because the Eagles could use an upgrade.
Sure could.
Wide receiver 3. We've been kind of spoiled in the NFL recently with these wide receiver classes. To me, outside the Ohio State kid, I don't think this wide receiver class is that great. Am I underestimating it?
I think it's a little lean at the top, and I love Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think he's going to be really, really good. I don't think he's on that Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson level, but whatever the tier below that is, that's where I would put him, and I think he belongs in that group. But your next crop of receivers are either all of the kind of smaller variety without necessarily elite speed. I'm talking, Zay Flower, vertical, like true straight line speed. Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison. Some people might put Josh Downs in that group. He's a second rounder for me, but Tyler Scott, same kind of idea. And then you've got Quentin Johnson, who's kind of the, I see him more as the Robin than a Batman, but a very good Robin. But I worry about the drops too. And there's enough questions with the higher end guys. Jalen Hyatt, he's sort of a one trick pony in my mind right now. Will Fuller part 2, if you will. So yeah, I would say that the questions are really at the top. I think there's actually some value to be had in day 3. A guy like Rakeem Jarrett, who was such an elite recruit out of high school and never quite put it all together. Had some promising workouts. What do you do with a Keyshawn Butte at LSU? Those coaches thought he was a first rounder the day he walked into the building, the former staff. Yeah. He's had a rough go. So there's a lot of those like question marks in day 3, even late day 2, maybe Rashee Rice or Michael Wilson with all the injuries. I think some of those are going to turn out. So I think the real value for me is a little bit later. But again, it's still a bit of a dart throw. So I hear you. It's just like we have been spoiled, and this year's just not quite as appealing on the the curb appeal right now.
All right, since we've checked all the other boxes at the high-level offensive position, we might as well do tight ends too while we're at it.
Sure.
And not Eagle related, because Eagles already have Dallas Goedert, so I don't want you to factor this into what the Eagles will do. Just overall in the draft, a lot of people are talking up Darnell Washington of Georgia, and I know he's a physically athletic freak, but he didn't start at Georgia because the Boxers kid there might be a top 10 pick at tight end next year. Do you hold that against him like I do? Maybe shame on me, and not give him his props because he is as big and as talented and athletic as he is? Or do you look at production and go, wait a minute, we're talking about taking this kid this high. He got how many catches over the last 3 years at Georgia? I think the Myers kid is easily, well, I shouldn't say easily. Kincaid and Myers are close. Give me your rankings of the tight ends coming up in the NFL draft.
Shame on you, Jody. I'm so disappointed. No, I'm kidding. I'm not that disappointed. No, obviously they had unusual depth there too. I mean, they even had Eric.
They have
Gilbert.
Unusual depth everywhere, Georgia. Yeah. You can't blame anybody.
That's how you win back-to-back championships.
You guys, if you stack up the early, the late 90s, early 2000s Miami teams with this Georgia and teams in this era, over a 4-year period, Miami had more first-round picks, but Georgia's had more picks or could have more picks after this year. So, I mean, it's unbelievable what they've done to kind of, turn the crimson tide, if you will, turn the tide in the SEC. But to Darnell Washington, you are projecting a little bit because, like you said, he wasn't a featured receiver. But when he did catch the ball, he averaged 17 yards a grab. He was a great intermediate receiver who could sometimes jump over defenders, out muscle them, things like that. I will say, I don't think he's quite the polished run blocker everyone's making him out. It's always a run, road grader in the run game. Yeah, he can bend at the waist and he kind of overreaches. He's a big guy. He's sort of built like a college basketball power forward, he's just figuring some of these things out, but he's so gifted, so big, so athletic. I don't think he'll ever be a superstar, but I think he's going to be, a great possibility as a receiver and a great possibility as a blocker. So, but Mayer is so complete. He just doesn't have he doesn't have a superpower, but he doesn't have a weakness, I don't think. I mean, he's good to very good at almost everything. So I think he's going to play for a decade. Dalton Kincaid is fantastic. I think he's really a special receiver, but even with his doctor clearing him, the back issues are, a potential red flag for some teams and just a worry of when he'll, if those will become an issue at some point.
Yeah, I think Michael Mayer would be a Hall of Famer if it was like 1990.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's a Jason Witten. That's what he is. He's Jason Witten, in my opinion, that kind of player.
It's going to be interesting to see where he fits in because he is so unique and so many. And Dallas Goedert's like that. He can play inline, can flex. You don't see a lot of tight ends that can hold up as blockers these days.
Yep.
Defensive tackle is interesting here in Philadelphia, Eric. The Eagles lost 5 defensive starters in free agency, most notably Javon Hargrave. But, they're one of, I think, 100 teams that use the same Vic Fangio defensive scheme. Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but
yes.
Too many teams use that. I think there's going to be a tipping point at some point. But one thing I've noticed with the Eagles is they're looking at a lot of those so-called gap and a half players, they call them, like Jordan Davis. They like to come at you in waves. So, these interior defensive linemen, they looked at Mazzie Smith. They looked at Jacqueline Roy from LSU, Jervon Dexter, all these players. I'm going to guarantee they take one in the day 2 somewhere. Any of those guys stand out. They're not sexy, but those gap and a half run stuffer types.
Yeah, Keandre Coburn at Texas is another one who could go in that sort of 4th, 5th range. Siaki Ika from Baylor's obviously a thickly built guy and everything. And yeah, Javon Dexter's really interesting. I mean, the athletic traits are, you just don't see guys who are 6'6" running sub 4.9 40s. Like that's something to really take note of. He is a little bit shorter limbed than you'd expect for that size, but it's like the tape is not all that exciting, right? I mean, it just you kind of think like, wow, this guy's gonna dominate, and he gets a tackle for loss every 3 or 4 games. I don't think he ever, I could be wrong, I hope I'm not wrong, I don't think he ever forced a fumble in college, but did make some athletic plays. Like he had 2 interceptions in his career. You just sort of say to yourself, wow, he does have some sort of basketball ability. He's a really interesting one for me, either as a 3 technique or possibly as a 4-eye or a 5. I mean, he can play a lot of positions. I just don't know that, if you're looking for unsexy with some sexy qualities, that's kind of who I think he might be. So he's one to keep
he's
in
a
mind.
Florida guy too. So
and a Florida, right?
Howie will lean toward a Florida guy when given the chance. Yeah. All right, I'm going to tie the 2 guests we had on today in a specific way. Derek Gunn told me earlier I need to get a something to while away my time, a hobby, because I worry too much about Jalen Hurts' contract not being signed yet. I have it. It's called betting on the horses. I like the handicap and compete against all the other bettors. See if this fits a player for your draft status. Every once in a while I'll get to a race and I'll handicap and I'll go, man, I like this 20-1 shot. I can't understand why they would make this horse 20-1. He looks much better on paper than this to me.
Right.
And then they open up the betting, and sometimes he goes to 10-1. You go, yeah, see, I was right. He shouldn't have ever been at 20-1. Sometimes he just stays at 20 and you start to second guess yourself. Wait a minute. If he's that much better, why is he still 20-1? Maybe they know better than me.
Right.
You got a guy that you're targeting as a 4th to 5th rounder, day 3 pick, whatever. You start to check out other people's mock drafts. Someone has them up even higher than you. Go, see, I like that. I knew that guy I knew he was being under. But then you're looking, nobody else has got this guy other than you. So you start to second guess yourself. What am I seeing that nobody else is seeing? Do you have a guy like that you feel good about? You've seen on tape. You can't believe hasn't gotten the respect that he deserves, but you're not 100% sure yet. Do you have a guy like that?
Yeah. All right. In what range did you say it was? When you're looking
day 3, a day 3 guy that you think could actually be day 2. You had him as a 2-3, a 3-4, but you would not be shocked if he moved up into the second round. Everybody else is projecting him as a 6 or a 7 or undrafted. A guy you feel good about that you're still positive that you've got a better read on him than everybody else. Despite the fact that maybe people aren't thinking or projecting or mocking along those same lines.
Yeah, it's maybe a little earlier than that, more of the day, possible late day 2, but more, I would say, early day 3 for both. 2 defensive backs who've kind of caught my eye the more I've watched them, and they were both kind of post combine review guys. Like, all right, I've seen him, but now I got to watch him a little more. Jatavius Martin from Illinois. I knew about him, but Devin Witherspoon was getting all the attention. There's some other guys on that defense, and so he did kind of slip through the cracks as far as top 100 prospects in that kind of thinking, but he tested great at the combine. He's got slot, corner, outside corner, safety, versatility. There's something there.
That's what the Eagles like.
Yeah. I mean, I would keep an eye on him. I mean, he's lean, but long, he's got enough length, I think. Anthony Johnson is another one from Iowa State. Blank for a minute, but I don't know that he's an outside corner, but he's played there before, which you at least have that flexibility. We've seen with a guy like Jalen Mills, who's played a little of both in his career, that sort of thing. He switched to safety last season for ISU and looked really good. Like, it looked like a guy who'd been playing there for 3 or 4 years. So I don't know. There's something about him that just fascinates me that I think is maybe being sort of swept under the rug or forgotten about a little bit. So those are 2 DBs that wherever they go, somewhere in that 90 to 140 range, if I had to sort of throw a dart, I think they're going to kick their landing spot.
Nice.
All right, last one from me, Eric. Make sure you follow Eric at Eric_Edholm, lead NFL draft writer for NFL.com. Does a tremendous job. We've been talking about sexiness a little bit too much. We're getting people excited, but I'm gonna end it. Put you on the spot with the sexiest position of all. The Eagles need a stinking punter.
All right.
One of the reasons they lost the Super Bowl was because Aaron Cepas
That's a fair
punted
point.
the ball where he shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And they, he was injured before. They went with Brett Kern, a veteran, was not good. They need an answer at punter. They don't have a lot of picks. They're probably not going to draft one, but there's always an undrafted guy. There was that big kid from Tulane last year. Are there any punters? I need an NFL level punter. Eric Edholm.
Yeah, I think there are a couple. The kid from Rutgers, Adam Korsak, I think I could be wrong, but I would say maybe he might have been the one everyone's kind of buzzing about. But I thought he was just okay at the Senior Bowl, excuse me. And Michael Turk from Oklahoma, crazy story if you guys remember. He was at Arizona State, went to the combine in 2020 before the pandemic. Benched like 25 times. He ran a 20-yard shuttle. Like, he's an athlete, right? But he's now back in this draft. So he went to Oklahoma for a couple years, sort of kept pushing the NFL off. I think he's one who will get drafted. I don't know by whom, right? There's a kid named Ethan Evans from Wingate College.
Wingate College.
Yeah, so he's somebody who special teams coaches have kind of taken notice of. Let me try to think of one more here. Oh, the kid from Michigan and Michigan State both have punters.
Yeah,
Brad Robbins from Michigan and I'm blanking on his name. Bryce Behringer. There you go. Thank you. Yes, it came to me right away. But yeah, I think Korsak and Turk are the names that I've heard the most. I haven't gone deep on my punter dives this year. Keep that between us, but I am a punter guy. Don't get me wrong. Okay. I'll make up this week, So yeah, it's not like there's some generational left-footed, kick it out of the stadium guy with, gyro ball spin or anything.
And it's not as important. Everybody's going for it on fourth down, but boy, when you need a big punt in a big situation, it's nice to have a guy who can come through for you.
Absolutely. No doubt about that. Aaron kickers, right? Long snapper too.
And unfortunately, the Eagles did not in the Super Bowl. All right, E, when is the next mock or the last mock? How many you got left in you before the actual draft?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I have like a early next week. I got to look. And then I've got my final. I don't know, Matt, could be wrong about that. I may only have one more. I believe it or not, good. I know. I'm not, like you said, I don't just pepper people with mock of the day. I don't have that.
I wouldn't mind. I guarantee you there's somebody out there who does a mock draft every day.
And more power to them. Yeah. I like to see my kids every now and then.
Yeah, but between you and I, complete bullshit. They're just moving a couple of guys around there. Oh, they did 12 hours of work before they put up the mock 24 hours later. And that's why they move a couple guys around. It's BS. But
rearranging the deck chairs. Right. Yeah,
exactly. We appreciate your efforts for NFL.com. And whenever you come out with us, you're on Birds 365. Eric, good catching up. We'll talk to you probably after the draft, get your review on who did what and how well and who screwed up. And yeah, we call people on the carpet. So we'll get you to do that with us in a couple of weeks. Thanks, bud.
Pleasure's mine, guys. Have a great day. See you.
Eric Edholm, check him out. NFL.com. I read him at Yahoo for years. And I remember when he jumped over, he said, yeah, the big boys are calling. I said, good on you, Eric. As long as you'll come on Birds 365 and give us some insight, we'll promo the heck out of whatever you want. We come back to put a bow on the show here on Birds 365 next. Stick around.